I was standing on that dusty road, hands on my hips, watching a woman in a designer suit point at my John Deere tractor strapped to the back of a flatbed truck. Her voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the quiet morning air as she ranted about property values and aesthetic integrity. That's when I told her, calm as ever, "Ma'am, that tractor you had towed doesn't just belong to me. It belongs to the United States military." The look on her face? Priceless. How fast can an HOA president's power trip turn into a federal offense? Well, I was about to show her. I never expected to spend my golden years battling a homeowners association I didn't even belong to. After 30 years in the Army Corps of Engineers, I finally claimed my own piece of the American dream, a 40-acre farm in the outskirts of Meadowbrook, Virginia. The land had been in agricultural use for generations before developers started snapping up parcels for so-called premium planned communities. It was hard to watch, but I knew my farm was protected. My wife, Linda, and I were meticulous when we bought the property. Our real estate agent, Mark Whitman, assured us that our land was grandfathered under county zoning laws dating back to 1952. I even had it in writing. This was legally designated farmland, and no one, not even the priciest HOA with the shiniest gold-embossed letterhead, could change that. Life was peaceful at first. I spent my mornings tending to the land, working in my converted barn-turned workshop, and maintaining the John Deere 5075E, a military-grade tractor I had through the Department of Defense's Veteran Equipment Preservation Program. It wasn't just any tractor. It was part of a federal initiative to support veterans in agriculture, and I took my responsibility seriously. Every few months, I hosted educational programs for local schools, letting kids climb up and learn how real farming worked. Even the Department of Defense sent a representative for quarterly inspections. Major John Reynolds had told me more than once, "Jack, you're not just farming. You're keeping history alive." I believed that. Then Vicky Davenport moved into Willow Creek Estates, the HOA-controlled development bordering my land, and everything changed. A former pharmaceutical executive from Connecticut, she had the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and a voice that could cut glass. It didn't take long for her to set her sights on transforming the neighborhood, and by neighborhood, she meant everything she could see. Her campaign for HOA president came with professionally printed yard signs, bold promises about enhancing property values, and a barely concealed mission to remake Meadowbrook into the kind of place that didn't have room for people like me. 2 weeks after she won the election, by just 32 votes, I received the first of many letters. The 4-page HOA memorandum, topped with a golden embossed logo, laid out her vision. Anything unsightly was a threat to the community's aesthetic standards, including farm equipment, livestock, and improvised structures. The kicker? Even though my farm wasn't inside the HOA, the memo claimed that HOA authority extended to visual corridors affecting community aesthetics. In other words, if she could see it, she could control it. Linda sighed when she read it. Here we go. Another city person who wants country views without country living. I figured I'd nip the problem in the bud. So, I did what any reasonable man would do. I invited Vicky over for coffee. I should have known that was a mistake. The following Saturday morning, I stood on my porch with a fresh pot of coffee brewing, waiting for Vicky Davenport to arrive. Right on cue, a white Range Rover glided up my dirt driveway like it didn't belong there, which, frankly, it didn't. She stepped out in a navy blue business suit, polished heels sinking slightly into the loose gravel. She took one sweeping glance at my land, my barn-converted workshop, and the John Deere parked neatly by the fence, and I could already see the disapproval setting into her face. I kept things polite. I poured her coffee, laid out my property documentation, and walked her through every legal protection I had. I even explained the military significance of the tractor, showing her paperwork that proved it wasn't just farm equipment but part of a federal veteran education program. When I was done, I set my mug down and said, "I understand you have concerns, but I'm within my rights. That tractor isn't going anywhere." She smiled, thin and forced. "Well, Mr. Harrison, I appreciate the information. But this is about the community as a whole. You have to understand, aesthetics impact property values, and my job is to ensure everyone benefits from a well-maintained environment." I leaned back in my chair. "Your job is to enforce HOA rules within HOA property, which this isn't." Her smile didn't waver, but her grip on her coffee cup tightened. She left soon after, and I thought, that's the end of it. It wasn't. By the following week, I started receiving weekly certified letters from the HOA, each more aggressive than the last. The first was a friendly notice about unauthorized machinery within visible distance of the Willow Creek entrance. The second threatened legal action if I didn't remove derelict equipment, meaning my fully operational John Deere. The third came with a letterhead from Winston and Leeds attorneys at law, or so I thought. A quick check revealed it wasn't a prestigious law firm, just Vicky's brother-in-law's office in Baltimore. She wasn't done. Noise complaints started rolling in. Apparently, my 7 a.m. farm work, which had been going on for months without issue, was now considered a nuisance disturbance, violating residential quiet hours. I wasn't about to be bullied off my own land, so I prepared my response. I compiled every zoning document, every county ordinance, and every legal protection I had, then sent them to the HOA in a thick envelope via certified mail. If they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. Then, a few days later, I received a visitor. Miguel Sanchez, the county zoning inspector, pulled up in his pickup truck, stepping out with a clipboard and a knowing look. "Jack, I got a formal complaint against your property." I crossed my arms. "Let me guess. Something about unsightly equipment?" He chuckled. "That, and your farm operations being a disturbance to the neighboring premium community." I led him on a full tour of my property, showing him my agricultural zoning permits and explaining the federal program tied to the tractor. He took photos, made notes, and then shook his head. "Vicky's got no leg to stand on," he said, flipping through my paperwork. "In fact, I'd love to feature your setup in the County Historical Society newsletter, show people how modern farms integrate with growing communities." That was victory number 2. But Vicky wasn't done losing. 2 days later, I spotted her Range Rover parked at the edge of my property, just outside the fence line. At first, I ignored it, until I noticed her stepping out with a leather-bound notebook and a camera every morning. At precisely 8:15 a.m., she parked in that same spot, taking photos, writing notes, and watching me like I was under surveillance. Linda, watching from the kitchen window, frowned. "That woman's got too much time on her hands." I wasn't laughing. The next morning, I checked my security footage, and sure enough, I caught her ducking under the split-rail fence, stepping onto my land for a closer look. She was trespassing. I called Deputy Adam Walker, a local sheriff's officer who'd been in my veterans coffee group for years. He reviewed the footage, then paid Vicky a personal visit. When he came back, he was shaking his head. She tried to claim she was just standing in the easement. I had to explain that an easement doesn't mean she can trespass at will. She got a formal warning. That should have been the end of it. But instead, Vicky escalated to something far worse, something I never saw coming. A week later, I received a letter from the county. I opened it, expecting another complaint. But my stomach dropped as I read the first line. Asterisk, this letter serves as official notification that Parcel 47A, previously designated as agricultural land, is no longer classified under county agricultural protections. Future farming operations may be subject to review under new zoning ordinances. Asterisk. I read it twice, then a third time. It didn't make sense. My land had been protected for decades. I called Miguel Sanchez, who answered immediately. When I read him the letter, there was a long pause. Then he muttered, "Damn it, Jack, she went around me." Vicky had pushed a rezoning order through an emergency county meeting, citing ongoing community complaints about farm-related disturbances. Worse, she had apparently met privately with several county officials at a closed-door dinner weeks earlier, something a sympathetic zoning clerk leaked to Miguel. This wasn't just harassment anymore. This was an attack on my livelihood. If the rezoning held, it meant my land could no longer legally support full-scale farming operations. It meant my tractor, my livestock, even my barn, could all be challenged legally. I stared at that letter in disbelief, feeling a slow burn of anger in my chest. She wasn't just trying to fine me or hassle me with letters. She was trying to take my farm away. And I knew, right then and there, that I wasn't going to let her win. The following weeks felt like a slow-moving war. I filed a formal appeal against the rezoning decision, backed by county historical preservation advocates, my legal documentation, and the Department of Agriculture. I wasn't the only one outraged. Neighbors who had lived here for decades started speaking up, furious that an HOA president was trying to rewrite county land use policies for her own convenience. Even Miguel Sanchez, the zoning inspector, put in an official objection. But these things take time, and time was exactly what Vicky was counting on. She wanted to exhaust me, to make it so inconvenient that I'd fold before the county could fix its mistake. That's when she made her biggest move yet. Linda and I had planned a 4-day trip to help our daughter with our newborn grandson. Before leaving, I finished some fieldwork and parked my John Deere 5075E along the dirt access road near my property fence. It was still fully on my land but easily visible from Willow Creek's entrance. I didn't think much of it. I'd parked it there plenty of times before. When we got back that Thursday afternoon, something felt off. As I turned onto the access road, I saw an empty patch of dirt where my tractor had been. My stomach tightened. I knew I hadn't moved it. I was out of the truck before the engine stopped, scanning the area. The tire tracks from a heavy vehicle were still fresh in the dirt. Then, I saw it, an envelope taped to my front door, marked with the Willow Creek HOA letterhead. I tore it open and read the printed notice inside. Notice of Nuisance Abatement Action pursuant to Community Protection Ordinance 15C. Unauthorized equipment in violation of aesthetic standards has been removed. Contact Hillside Impound for retrieval information. At the bottom, in elegant blue ink, was the signature, Victoria Davenport, HOA President. I was gripping the paper so hard my fingers creased it. I pulled out my phone and dialed the impound lot listed on the notice. A gruff voice answered. "Yeah, we got a green John Deere towed this morning from near Willow Creek Estates." Property manager signed the paperwork. I barely kept my voice steady. "What property manager?" Lady in a blue suit. Said it was unauthorized equipment on HOA adjacent property. Gave us a signed authorization for removal. "That was my tractor," I growled. "On my land. You just took government property." There was a pause. "Well, I don't know about all that, sir, but if you want to get it back, it's $1,200 for the tow fee, plus $150 per day for storage. Been here since 6 a.m., so that's 1 day already." Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Victoria Davenport. I clenched my jaw and answered. "Jack," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "I thought it best to inform you personally that the HOA has exercised its right to remove nuisance equipment. The community entrance looks so much better already." I forced myself to breathe. "Vicky, you had no legal right to touch that tractor. If you want that eyesore back, you'll need to pay the fees and sign an agreement never to bring farm equipment onto the access road again. Oh, and our attorney will be contacting you about reimbursing the HOA for the cost of removing your fence post, which was improperly placed near a community access point." I almost laughed. The audacity of this woman. She had no idea what she had just done. "Vicky," I said, voice deadly calm, that tractor doesn't belong to me." "Oh, Jack, let's not play games," she said, exasperated. "It was on your land. You admitted as much." "No," I said, letting the moment hang. "It belongs to the United States government." Silence. Then she scoffed. "Oh, please, Jack. If that were true, don't you think I would have heard about it? You just committed unauthorized seizure of federal property. I suggest you start reading up on felony charges." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were still shaking as I called Major John Reynolds at the Department of Defense's Veteran Equipment Program. He picked up on the second ring. "Jack," he said, friendly but alert. "Everything all right with the John Deere?" I exhaled, steadying myself. "No, Major. HOA had it towed. They think it's just farm equipment." Silence. Then, in a clipped, serious tone, he said, "Stay put. Document everything. Take photos of the boundary where the tractor was taken. And do not contact this HOA person again. I'm making some calls." By the time I put my phone down, the fight had changed. Vicky thought she was dealing with a stubborn old farmer. Now she was dealing with the United States military. The next morning, I was up before the sun, standing on my porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the dirt road that led to my farm. I wasn't waiting for Vicky. I was waiting for the federal government ***. At exactly 8:00 a.m., a convoy of vehicles rolled in. A government SUV, 2 military police cars, and a civilian sedan pulled into my driveway. Out stepped Major John Reynolds, flanked by Captain Emily Foster from the Judge Advocate General's Corps, 2 military police officers, and Sam Whitaker from the Department of Transportation. These weren't county bureaucrats or HOA board members. These were federal officials, and they weren't here to play games. They got to work immediately. Captain Foster took my statement while the MPs photographed the exact location where the tractor had been taken. Major Reynolds examined my security footage, showing Vicky directing the tow truck operator. Sam Whitaker pulled out a folder, scanning the HOA paperwork Vicky had used to justify the removal. He let out a low whistle. "She filed this under abandoned equipment," he muttered. "And had it transported on public roads without authorization? That's multiple federal violations." Captain Foster closed her notebook. "Mr. Harrison, this isn't just a zoning dispute anymore. Unauthorized removal of federally owned property is a serious offense. Your tractor is part of an official government program and bears clearly marked federal identification tags. The HOA president not only had no authority to remove it, but she also falsified documentation to justify the seizure." Major Reynolds pulled out his phone and made a call. I heard the clipped efficiency in his tone. This wasn't a courtesy call. This was an order, ***. We're intercepting the tow truck before it gets processed into impound, Captain Foster explained. The Department of Defense has already contacted the lot and ordered them to halt any further action. Your tractor will be returned immediately. I exhaled slowly. That was victory number 4. Then, right on cue, the sound of tires crunching on gravel made me turn toward the access road. A white Range Rover came to a sharp stop, dust kicking up in the air. The driver's side door flung open, and out stormed Vicky Davenport, her navy blue business suit crisp, her designer heels sinking into the dirt as she stomped toward us. She held a leather-bound portfolio in one hand, her face flushed with barely contained rage. "What is the meaning of this?" she snapped, glaring at the tow truck parked in my driveway with my John Deere tractor still secured to its flatbed. Her eyes flicked to the military officers, and for the first time since I met her, she hesitated. I stepped forward, adjusting my cowboy hat. "That eyesore you towed belongs to the United States military, ma'am." The moment played out exactly like the thumbnail in my mind, ***, me in my farm clothes, standing firm, while Vicky, in her pristine business suit, looked ready to explode, ***. Captain Foster approached her, her tone professionally neutral but firm. "Mrs. Davenport, I'm Captain Emily Foster, Judge Advocate General's Corps, United States Army. We've intercepted this vehicle after receiving an alert about its unauthorized removal. We need to have a discussion about the multiple federal offenses involved." Vicky's carefully crafted composure cracked. That tractor was a community nuisance, it was on a shared access point. "No, ma'am." Sam Whitaker, the Department of Transportation official, held up a printed satellite image of my property, zoomed in on the exact GPS coordinates of where the tractor had been parked. "Our team measured the property lines this morning. The vehicle was 38 feet inside Mr. Harrison's private land." Vicky's mouth opened, then shut. The tow truck driver, who had been silent until now, shuffled awkwardly and cleared his throat. She told me it was abandoned equipment. Signed all the papers saying she had full authority to remove it. Captain Foster handed Vicky a formal cease and desist order. "Mrs. Davenport, you are hereby instructed to immediately cease any interference with federally managed equipment. The Department of Defense is conducting a formal investigation into this incident, and you should expect contact from our office within 3 business days." I watched as Vicky's hands trembled slightly while she held the document. "This isn't over," she muttered, stepping back toward her car. Captain Foster didn't even blink. "From a federal standpoint, Mrs. Davenport, it's just beginning. You may want to consult legal counsel familiar with felony property violations." Vicky said nothing. She turned sharply on her heel, climbed into her Range Rover, and sped off, leaving a trail of dust behind her. By that evening, the entire town knew what had happened. Neighbors called, texted, even stopped by just to see the tractor sitting proudly back on my property. People who had been afraid to challenge the HOA before now had proof that Vicky wasn't untouchable. But the real reckoning came 2 days later, when an emergency HOA meeting was called. I didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Residents took turns detailing their own grievances, unfair fines, intimidation, backroom deals. Then, a bombshell dropped. Walter Phillips, the HOA treasurer, stood and exposed a hidden bank account where thousands of HOA dollars had been funneled into beautification projects that never happened. The board demanded to know where the money had gone. Vicky wasn't there to answer. An hour before the meeting, she had submitted her resignation. Her house was listed for sale the following week. That was victory number 5. But the final victory? Months later, I stood on my porch and looked out at my farm, my John Deere freshly repainted, the new government-issued identification stenciled in bold letters across the side. A message, clear as day: property of the U.S. government. Unauthorized removal is a federal offense. Judge Bob Chong, the newly elected HOA president, chuckled when he first saw it. "Best HOA deterrent I've ever seen." I took a sip of coffee, nodded, and smiled. "Some boundaries," I said, "are worth marking clearly." The weeks after Vicky's fall from power felt like breathing fresh air after a storm. With her gone, the HOA board was in shambles, scrambling to repair the damage she had done. Judge Bob Chong, now the interim president, wasted no time setting things right. The first order of business? Suspending all pending violation notices and reviewing every fine she had imposed. Homeowners who had been bullied into compliance, whether over flower choices, fence heights, or basketball hoops, were finally heard. It turned out I wasn't the only one she had targeted. The forensic accounting audit revealed that Vicky had used HOA funds to pay for the tractor's towing fees without board authorization, listing it under community beautification. That wasn't even the worst of it. She had funneled money into personal, consulting fees, hired private security cameras to monitor specific homes she disliked, and even attempted to push through a rezoning proposal that would have made it easier to sell certain houses to developers. In short, she had weaponized the HOA for personal gain. The HOA wasn't just overhauled, it was transformed. Instead of arbitrary fines and power plays, the new board focused on actual community projects. The people who had once viewed my farm as an inconvenience now saw it as an asset. The educational programs I ran expanded, with residents offering their own skills. A retired teacher set up a historical series, a master gardener started community gardening workshops, and even the HOA clubhouse began hosting rural heritage events. The same people who once whispered complaints about my John Deere now brought their grandkids over to learn about farm life and engineering. Then came the final surprise. The HOA won a regional planning award for community renewal and heritage preservation. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same group that had once tried to erase my farm now had a plaque hanging in their clubhouse featuring a photo of my John Deere with a group of kids gathered around it. As for Vicky, her house sold within a month, and I later heard through the grapevine that she had moved into a high-rise condo downtown. The funniest part? That building had an even stricter HOA. The real estate agent who handled the sale chuckled when Linda ran into her at the store. Apparently, she's already filed 2 complaints against her new neighbors, she had said. Some people just don't change. I stood on my porch one crisp autumn morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over my land. My John Deere tractor sat exactly where it belonged, the bold U.S. military marking standing out in fresh paint. I had fought for my land, for my rights, and in the end, I hadn't just won, I had changed the community for the better. So, what do you think? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.